I just love the BizNews community. We've got a number of WhatsApp channels for our premium members, and anything that's interesting seems to be posted there and nudged me in the direction of, in particular here, what's going on in Oudtshoorn. Well, we've had a chance earlier today to talk to Dr. Corné Mulder. We're going to talk to another doctor now, Dr. Mark Burke, who's on the other side of the fence. Corné is with the Freedom Front Plus, Mark is with the Democratic Alliance. There's been a bust-up of, seismic proportions there. What does it mean for South African politics? What does it mean for the people of Oudtshoorn? We'll find out in a moment. Lovely to be talking with you, Mark. It was a fascinating television discussion that you and Corné Mulder had the other evening. At the BizNews conference in March, Corné was one of our keynote speakers, and he fascinated us with the tale that his father, who was also a politician, had told him, that the one thing you never do is you never lose your temper. Well, in that interview, you seem to have gotten under his skin, if not get him to lose his temper. It was quite vibrant. How do you guys get on with each other outside of a television studio?
Thank you, Alec, for the opportunity. I'll start off by saying that I don't know Dr. Corné Mulder all that well. I introduced myself to him when I joined the benches of Parliament earlier this year, and we've had a few pleasantries, but I wouldn't say that I know the man exceptionally well. Having said that, I do have respect for him. I have respect for the institutional knowledge that he carries around Parliament, and I also respect the party that he represents.
You, in that discussion, you seem to remain pretty calm throughout, stated your case. What brought you into politics, so we can just understand a little bit more about you?
It's a great question. Yes, my background is that I spent 5 years in venture capital and then spent another 5 years building my own financial technology business with 2 co-founders. It started with, the 3 of us on laptops, and as a team of more than 40 people now operating in a number of countries. It wasn't the obvious choice for the last 10 years that I would have transitioned into politics. However, the Democratic Alliance, with its organizational depth, decided to bring in fresh faces from outside of politics and make sure that they bolster the ranks with people who are willing to cycle in to come help. And from a personal perspective, I think we can all agree that the country is not heading in the right direction. And I wanted to put my hand up to try and help.
Where are you from? What part of the country are you from?
There's this brilliant scene in a Netflix series called The Politician. And in the scene, the young man is in a taxi, and he says to the taxi driver, "I've lived in New York for 5 years, but I don't know when I get to call myself a New Yorker." And he asked the taxi driver, "When do I get to call myself a New Yorker?" And the taxi driver said to him, "Well, like anything in life, when you say it and you believe it's true, then it is." And so with that reference point, I consider myself a Cape Townian. But to answer your question, I was born in the Free State, born and bred in the dirt.
So how do you then get to speak on behalf of the DA on Oudtshoorn, which is, I suppose, about halfway between Cape Town and the Free State and where you come from?
Brilliant. I'm actually speaking to you today from Oudtshoorn. I am the newly appointed constituency head. When there's a process that gets followed, I imagine in every party, but definitely in the Democratic Alliance, where because of our proportional representation system, we allocate constituencies to politicians post the filling of their seats in Parliament. And in that process, individuals can indicate where their preference is. And so I put up my hand. I said, I think there's good work to be done in Oudtshoorn. It's a place that matters. I care for the people here. And through that process, I was assigned as the constituency head. I wasn't quite anticipating what's happened here over the last 2 weeks when I put my hand up for that role. But nonetheless, here we are, and we'll make the best of it.
So take us through, from your perspective, what has happened in the last 2 weeks in Oudtshoorn.
Missed you briefly there, but I think the question is if I could just give you an overview of what happened in Oudtshoorn over the last 2 weeks. Yes, I think there are 2 versions of what's happened here, which would be the Freedom Front version and the DA version. I'll try and stick as close to the facts as possible, but happy to dial into any one of those pertinent facts. The Democratic Alliance was able to cobble together a coalition in Oudtshoorn. It's a municipality in which nobody won an outright majority, although we did get 30% of the vote. Because of the way that we've got a proportional list and wards, we didn't have exactly that amount of seats in terms of representation. So we've got 28% of the representation with 30% of the vote. There are a number of smaller parties, including the Freedom Front Plus, and some of those parties came together, formed a coalition after the 2021 election. And I'd say fairly soon after the most recent national election, the Freedom Front felt that it was no longer sustainable to be in a coalition with the DA. And a motion of no confidence was brought that succeeded, which meant that last Thursday our mayor was ousted from a seat. And in coalition with the ANC, the Freedom Front Plus then proceeded with their 10% of the vote and 12% of the representation to elect a Freedom Front mayor on Thursday of last week. So 2 weeks ago, Thursday, the motion of no confidence, Thursday of last week, the mayor. And here we are. Uncertainty is now the name of the game in Oudtshoorn. And the counterparty to the Freedom Front Plus is, of course, the ANC.
I went through the numbers from the 2021 election. There are 25 council seats in Oudtshoorn. And the reason we're spending so much time here is because it is a big change for the Freedom Front to no longer ally with the DA, but to ally with the ANC. But after that election, the ANC had 8 seats, DA 7, Freedom Front 3, one other party had 2, and then there were 5 parties that had 1. There's been a by-election subsequent to that, and the Patriotic Alliance has now gone up to 2 seats, the ANC down to 7. So you've got 7 ANC, 7 DA, 3 Freedom Front, 2 Patriotic Alliance, 2 ICOSA, and 25 seats in all. Work it out, you need 13. So it's very easy to see that if you got either the DA or the ANC together with the Freedom Front, you're sitting at 10, then you just need another 3 seats, and that seems pretty easy to do. But the Freedom Front are the swing factor in this. Corné Mulder says that he wanted to remain in coalition with the DA, but he says your mayor is impossible. He says your mayor is he didn't say it in these words, but I heard a bit of a kragtadigheid kind of character who it was my way or the highway, and that's the way the Freedom Front felt about it. They did ask Helen Zille, if as the federal chair of the DA, to please give them another mayor. That request was declined, and as a consequence, they say that's why they couldn't work with your mayor. And that is, I guess, the situation that he is sticking with. From your side, why is it that the DA is supporting its mayor, McPherson, so strongly in this instance?
Well, I think there are a couple of points to address in there, which is the disparity between the version of events as relayed by Dr. Mulder and our version. And then there's the separate question of why so strongly support a particular candidate. I would just contest the version of events as given by Dr. Mulder and point out that I'm the last person to kick somebody when he's down. But if you were to clinically assess the situation, the Freedom Front Plus, which I think plays an important part in South African politics, suffered a shocking defeat in this election. As a partner in the multi-party charter, they did not pull their weight. They did not bring us the votes that they promised. And we have to ask whether they are trying to redefine themselves post this result at the expense of working municipalities. Putting aside the disputing of the motive for departure from the status quo, let's perhaps address then the question of why support Mr. McPherson in his role. I myself was the subject of an intensive process of selection to become an MP for the DA. There's organizational depth in the Democratic Alliance. I, in a past life, interviewed between the Mandela Rhodes and the Rhodes Scholarship no less than 6 times, and with judges from the Constitutional Court and leaders in civil society and religion and so forth. And I can tell you hand on heart that the process to become a DA leader is far more intense. So Mr. McPherson would have been subject to the exact same process in terms of rigor to become a DA leader and, the candidate for mayor in town. So this is not an individual having a strong relationship with another individual and therefore they get to become the mayor. It's people that are selected on the basis of merit. And then you have to get to a matter of principle. If you acknowledge that we select people based on their competence and we can't have other parties dictate to us what we should. The principle here is when the mayor starts doing his job, which will sometimes be hard, which will sometimes entail making tough decisions, that is exactly the point where you step in and say, I stand behind this gentleman. I won't start undermining him at this point. I drove into Oudtshoorn this morning and on my left there's this massive development happening, which I think is part of, the manufactured reasons presented to us of why the mayor has to go. But it is by far the biggest investment in Oudtshoorn's history. And there was a dispute over who should pay for a pipe that, delivers sewage from the facility, on which the council took a legal opinion from a leading law firm, which indicated that the council was liable for the cost. The developer then threatened from their side to also present a separate legal opinion stating the same thing. And given all of these factors, the decision was made to support this development. Now, I must point out that at no point in this whole process has Mr. McPherson been found guilty of any wrongdoing. There's merely this feeling that he was assertive and driving ahead with a needed process that separate independent experts were telling us is what needs to happen. So I don't want to get too stuck on the details of Oudtshoorn, but if the worst thing you can say about a man is that he did his job, then I'm happy to support him.
Oh, that's so interesting because the sewage pipe is the detail and it is the devil in this whole change of a historic relationship between the Freedom Front and the Democratic Alliance. And I think we must unpack that a little more. How big was the development and how much of what I'm trying to get to is how material was, I think it's 3 million rand is what Corné Mulder said the cost of moving the sewage line was. How material was that in the context of the entire development? And indeed, if the council had not moved the sewage line, would that development not have gone through? Was there a threat of that?
Well, I'll start first by saying that perhaps there's a beautiful metaphor for the Freedom Front's conduct and the issue at heart here. But moving on from that miserable situation, the cost is, from what I understand, 3.1 million rand, on which legal opinion was sought, and that the city instead of litigating on this issue, instead of chasing away business, which by the way is a principle that both the Freedom Front and the DA stand for. It's being open to business. It's being open to creating opportunities through the private sector. The issue at hand was then that let's let the development go ahead. Experts are telling us that the city is liable for this cost. The cost was not anticipated at the point of the onset of the development, but on assessment, it is the city's cost to bear. And should we not do that, the risk is both that we lose the investment and face litigation from the developer. So, as on the basis of those truths, the decision was made to go ahead. So I look at the situation from the outside, and I'm always keen to hear both sides of the story. But I'll point out again that at no point was there any wrongdoing. There's merely this feeling that a gentleman's approach to getting something done was not to the liking of the Freedom Front Plus. And that then makes us question whether this is actually the issue or whether there's a bigger play at hand. I was not able to discern from the conversation on Monday evening whether the Freedom Front Plus will continue to support the DA and other Western Cape municipalities. I've not been given that comfort. And that's a real concern for us. The concern here is that this is just the first domino to fall. And of course, the people in those municipalities will suffer as a result of this.
So they were spoiling for a fight in the way you're seeing it.
We left with few alternatives to understand their thinking. Of course, if somebody is starting to move in a certain direction, they might not always articulate to you exactly why they're doing that. And then when somebody is feeling emotional because they've been hurt, which is what has happened to the Freedom Front Plus after this last election, then perhaps you start lashing out at the people closest to you, in this case, the DA. But we left to try and pick up the pieces and discern why this is happening. looking at the facts, we're not able to determine that. And we then have to ask, why is this actually happening? What's the bigger game at play here?
So you're seeing a lot more in it, in other words, in what's happening in Oudtshoorn, that this could occur elsewhere in the country, and a trusted partner and a trusted ally no longer being so.
Absolutely. I don't want to get semantically stuck, but I also wouldn't say that we're seeing a lot more in it. The Freedom Front Plus took great exception to my calling them a minority party, which of course is what they are in the Western Cape, where Dr Mulder is the leader. They attained 1.4% of the vote in this last election, and we attained 55% of the vote, which does make us a majority party here. So I don't see a lot more in it, in that the Freedom Front Plus is not able to disproportionately affect the course of the DA's willingness and ability to serve society. But I am seeing more into the manufactured outrage in Oudtshoorn than what's actually happened on the ground. And I'm led to believe that maybe there's another game at play, for which we would soberly suggest that calmer heads prevail. Let's not upset working municipalities, which, by the way, is a promise that I saw Dr. Mulder made on television, that they would continue to be a reliable partner to us. Let's let calmer heads prevail. Let's not upset a bunch of municipalities. And I think there is an important role to play for the Freedom Front Plus, but it's not the course that they're taking at the moment.
How many municipalities are at risk of changing hands if the Freedom Front Plus were to take the same approach as it has done in Oudtshoorn?
Let's perhaps contain the conversation to the Western Cape, because the assurance I was given on Monday from Dr. Mulder is that Tshwane is not in danger. So, at the point before this last election, there were 11 municipalities that we co-governed in the Western Cape. Some things have changed elsewhere. So in the Garden route, the DA does no longer govern with, there's still support from the Freedom Front Plus, but it's a functional government even without them. There's some developments in George and now Oudtshoorn. So that number is reducing. I put it at 8 or 9 where we are still actively working together, depending on what the Freedom Front decides to do next. And again, there I would just urge that we maintain stability in governance and that we keep working together.
But surely at a local level, if the people get on, if the mayor in Oudtshoorn and the local Freedom Front guy got on, or the new mayor now, the Freedom Front member of the provincial, or one of the members of the municipality, then they can make it happen. But if you've got this conflict happening at local level, I suppose it's a little bit like a keg of gunpowder waiting for a spark. On those other 8 municipalities where you do co-govern with the Freedom Front Plus, what are relationships like between the people who work with each other?
I think it's a great question, and I think it's at the heart of what we should be advocating for here. Is on the whole, we get along. On the whole, the values that we both stand for, which is, open to business to help create opportunities, open to transparent and responsible governance. These are things we both value, the rule of law. And on the ground, people do get along. I was able to speak to the soon-to-be new mayor of the Garden route over the weekend, and he is very open to working together. Look, the raw reality is that we are so close to the levers of the power that allows us to do so much more. The country is calling out for us to work together. To borrow from Scott F. Fitzgerald, we can hardly fail to grasp the opportunity. It's right in front of us. And on the whole, we do get along. There's no reason that this should be happening. And I would again urge that we find common ground and we find a way to work together, or we will all be left to pick up the pieces. To answer your question, then, I think the relationship in most councils between most councillors is very functional, healthy. And I would encourage those councillors from both parties to come together and keep finding common ground, as they've done, and as Dr. Mulder has bragged about just 3 months ago.
There's a big risk that you're running here in Oudtshoorn, clearly, that you must be aware of, is that if the Freedom Front and the ANC do get it right, and they're sure to have a lot of support from the centre, then they could break this perception that it's only the DA that can actually govern at a local level. Has that entered your thinking at all? Because it appears as though that is and you as a business guy, you come from the business community, you come from an area which is highly competitive in, as you've explained to us, in the tech world. You've got to take these risks into account. And my question would be, has that risk been factored into this breakup?
I wish them well. At the end of the day, I'm the constituency head for Oudtshoorn. I want to serve the people here. If the new mayor and his alliance partners in the ANC are able to achieve service for the residents, then that is an excellent outcome. Party political interests can never take precedence over constituent interests. I am very skeptical of the ANC, especially at the local level, being a reliable counterparty to anybody. I doubt that the stability exists, even with the ANC cooperating in this municipality to make things work. But if in that very unlikely scenario, in my estimation, they shoot the lights out in this town, then I will be the first person to cheer them on.
Dr. Mark Burke from the Democratic Alliance, the constituency head for Oudtshoorn, and I'm Alec Hogg from BizNews.com.